dudes and dudettes, welcome back to Just a Dude podcast. I'm your host, Nathan, just a regular guy trying to figure out life one chat at a time. Today, we're diving into money, how to make it work for you, not just you work for it. Our guest is the legendary Monica Kaufman. She's a financial guru and a mastermind behind Harmony Wealth Academy. Monica, welcome to the show. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Hi, well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. I used to call myself a recovering financial advisor. I've been doing this for a long time. And the reality is, I've known this for a long time. I'm somebody who's like, okay, there's a problem. And if I can find a way to be part of the solution and help people take ownership, that's kind of what drives me. I'm a mom of two young adult men. One's an officer in the Army, and the other one's getting his PhD.
Excellent.
Let's see what else. I have been married for a lot of years. My husband has battled clinical depression, and that's been a real challenge for us, and it's forced us to really learn. It's been a very hard road, and I guess I'm a pet human. I love dogs and I love people. So
That's excellent. I love dogs too. At one point, Monica, we had 4 dogs in the house. So let me tell you, that is being outnumbered for sure when it comes to dogs. But my wife is definitely a pet person. We've got a couple of birds that we've had for years now. I mean, I think our Conyers, like, she's 17, I think. So it's like, she'll probably outlive us. But no, I love it that, dog people, I'm the same way. So Monica, but yeah, great. I want to, thank you so much for coming on, because I think what we're going to talk about today is, really money and things that, we should hopefully be doing. But what I wanted to ask was you kind of started the Harmony Wealth Academy, and it mentions your personal journey. And so what's the story there? Like what lit the fire to start this academy for you?
Okay, so many years ago, I realized when my kids were younger and I was invited in to run a program teaching what I called economic and financial reality, I realized that the industry stats were real. And it was essentially that 80% of the population is financially illiterate, and it's a multi-generational problem. So at this point, it's everybody's problem and nobody's fault. The question is, what do we do about it? So I saw that up front, and I saw how receptive people are. And then I realized as time progressed, the industry is shifting. So around about 2018-19, I had the chance to listen to a presentation by an industry expert. He's a PhD, and he's hired by one of the major firms. And what he does is he tracks the minds and the mindset and the drives of individual investors in the United States. And he basically said that the industry trends are to go towards the robos, and that the average person will never be able to get the help they need. But the reality is the average person may get help managing money, but if they don't have money to manage, they're not going to get the help because the education is not there. So I watched that, and then I remember watching basically the shutdown and the panic. And I saw people who were extremely high earners, very well educated, who were not doing what they needed to do and didn't understand the system. And that's when I was like, okay, I don't want fear and money fear to be what drives this country. Okay, so if I can reach people in a different way, that's what motivated me to start this. It was a combination of many years worth of seeing the cumulative effects.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that because, you're so right. When I just think back of looking, and it's funny, my wife and I were just talking about this last night, Monica, but we said, like when we were in high school, I don't ever, with the exception of I took an accounting class, so I knew how to, balance a checkbook, but that was the only class, simple thing like that, balancing a checkbook. That was the only class that offered it. It wasn't like a normal thing, in our public education system. They don't sit you down and say, okay, here's how you make a budget. Here's how you do here's how you balance a checkbook. Here's how you invest. Here's how you save, and none of that comes up. So when I saw, the Harmony Academy, I was like, this is cool because this is something that people really need. It's not really taught in schools. And unless you have a parent, that's an accountant or something like that, you may never learn how to really properly manage money.
Well, part of it is that let's step back a little bit. What is money?
Mm-hmm.
Money's just a set of tools in your hands. Okay. So what does it do? It is a tool that allows you Actually, let's step back a step further. In life, you have three things. You have the things you know how to do, the tools that you own, and the relationships you have.
Mhm.
Okay. And those relationships come with people who know how to do different things as well. So money is that tool that allows you to learn something, to acquire tools, or to hire somebody else to do something you can't or don't want to do. It is just a tool. It's like a screwdriver and a hammer.
Yeah.
So right now, for example, we're using a bunch of tools, right?
Oh, yeah, tons.
Okay. And are you afraid of any of them?
Not now. I was at
Right.
one point, though. Yes, you're absolutely right. Once you learn about the tools that you're using, you get comfortable with them and can use them well. But when you first, get off like, different program like the program we're recording with right now, I had no idea how to use it the first time.
Right. And that's the whole
Yeah.
point. So it's a tool. You learned how to use it, you manage it, and you do it. And there's no reason to approach it with fear. You sit there and you go, how do I do this? It's the same thing with money. Money is the tool you use to acquire knowledge, to acquire skills, to develop relationships. And then in reality, what I want people to do is to understand it's a tool that allows you to build the wealth so that you can actually pay yourself. So I guess I'm going a little too far.
No, no,
When
that's
I
fine. Go
look,
ahead.
okay, so when I look at things, let's take a different construct. Okay. Freedom really truly is the flip side of responsibility. You choose how you respond. The freer you are, the more choices you have to respond and to do things within your own life. It's a spiritual construct. I believe we were all created to be free, which means I believe we were all created to be responsible. When I'm not responsible, it weighs on me and it restricts my choices. Okay. And there are certain things that I have to do that I'm looking forward to getting done that are a little bit difficult, but they're out there and they're a function of what I need to do. That spiritual freedom flows down into every area of our lives. So the first area, really truly, that we experience this in is our physical development.
Mhm.
As babies, we can't do much of anything. We can cry, and then we learn how to do certain things. We learn how to giggle. We learn how to smile. We learn how to roll. We learn how to sit up. Okay. We learn how to make sounds. We go through that progression. If you take a look at life, you have that physical progression. And this one trainer from iFit used this construct. You start off in function, you move to health. Function is, do I know how to control the different parts of my body? Health is when everything works together
Mhm.
effectively. You move over to fitness. So, what is fitness? Do you have a definition for it?
I mean, for me, it's just taking your body to that next level and keeping it at the healthiest point that it can be.
Okay. So, he described it in a similar way, but what he said was it's the ability to handle the load. So, whatever load you can handle, that's your level of fitness. Same thing with financial fitness. Okay. So, when I look at that, I say, all right, there's the different pieces of everybody's financial life. It's not just their budget or their cash flow. Okay. It's to some degree their financial defenses, the amount of risk they're carrying and understand. It's some of their protection mechanisms, like, well, we'll go through that, but there are different protective mechanisms that you need to have in place. And then it's your foundation, and then it's your investments, and you move on from there. The ability to handle the load means that for whatever you need to do at that point in time, or for whatever your goals are at that point in time, you're not only paying your bills, but you're funding your load. That's financial fitness. And then financial performance is when you're building wealth that will pay you back. And so that financial performance point is when you build that out enough, you have enough wealth underneath you that work on a day to day basis becomes optional.
Gotcha. Well,
So that's what I consider to be financial freedom. When you don't have to work your job, but you have enough money to meet your goals, pay for yourself and your family, and you're building a wealth that will actually continue to pay you. That's what that is. And I think that a lot of times we don't define our terms. So if we don't define our
yeah,
goals, we don't get there.
exactly. And, is this something from your point of view that has more to do with managing the money that you get, or, does can this be done at any level, any financial level?
It
Yeah.
can. And the truth is that when I was first in the industry, I joined Merrill Lynch and somebody said to me, you have to read The Millionaire Next Door. And I didn't think they were very real, but that particular person allowed me to watch with a couple that came in, and they were in their mid 60s and retiring. When they were in their early 50s, their youngest child graduated from school and they realized they were in debt up to their eyeballs and didn't have enough money to retire. They shifted everything they were doing and she went back to work. They aggressively invested and they saved as much as they could, paid off their debt, paid it down, and turned it around in about 12, 13 years, if I remember
Wow.
correctly. And they were able to do what they wanted to do. Round about that time, I got two referrals. And the first one was a professional doctor who unfortunately had had a stroke. He had children. And quite frankly, if he had not had the disability insurance that he had through work, and his
Mm-hmm.
family might have had a problem. Even though he had a high income, he had that lifestyle creep that came in and he
Yeah.
didn't build what he needed.
Yeah, because I think, in Monica, so many of us oftentimes, we always say, oh, if I could only make more money, then I could save more or I could invest more. But quite often we find that most people, and I've even fallen into this prey too, is as we get more money, we just then tend to spend that money instead of doing what we actually intended to do, right? Or,
Well, that's
things come up like inflation, or, things start costing more, so you can't save as much. But
yeah, that's
yeah.
part of it. But I had another couple, that second referral that came in was a couple that if you looked at them from the outside, you wouldn't understand the resources they had. And neither one had ever made a tremendous amount of money, but they made a decision early in their marriage that they would live off one income and invest the other. They were proactive on every level, and they had a child who was differently abled, and they did everything they could. So the only debt they ever carried was their mortgage. They lived in a very modest home. And when they retired in their 50s, and it wasn't their decision to retire,
Hmm.
both of them had situations that happened. They were financially okay. He went back to work out of choice, but not out of necessity. And that's the position you want to be in.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you take a look at those incomes, which were modest, and you see the way they acted, they built out the wealth they needed. And you wouldn't think, based on their educational levels attained,
Hmm.
that they would have the sophistication that they had. They had that sophistication. They understood what they were doing. They understood their estate issues. Okay. They had their documents and their plan reviewed every 5 years because they had a daughter they were providing for.
Hmm.
They understood their investments. They understood everything that they were doing. Whereas other people with supposedly higher levels of higher education, don't have that degree of ownership. It
Hmm.
really is a decision. It's a decision that you're going to take ownership of this aspect of your life.
Yeah, and I mean that's a decision that most people need to make, but I have to assume some sacrifices have to come with that sometimes too, right?
Yeah, it is a sacrifice, but here's the thing. What I like to do is I look at people and I say, okay, you've done hard things in your life, right?
Yeah, we all have.
You've mastered things that were challenging. I can promise you that most of the things that you've mastered that were challenging are going to be less difficult than what you're going to do here. And if you can flip the switch and see it as an opportunity
Yeah.
to actually take ownership. Let me give you an example. I had a young individual that I mentored many years ago, and at the point that he got engaged, he sort of talked to me and he said, "Look, I've got an issue. I'm trying to figure this out, and my fiance and I want to save for a down payment on a house. How am I going to do this?" And I said, "Okay, where's the biggest area of money that you're spending?" He said, "Well, we go out with our friends every weekend. We go to dinners, we go to bars, but we want to hang out with our friends." And I said, "Okay, is there a core group of people in that group of friends that are at the same stage you're at?" He said, "They all were." I said, "Great.
Yeah.
What if you were to look them in the eyes and say, we're spending a lot of money doing this. Why don't we arrange once a week to get together at somebody's apartment, hang out, everybody brings some food, everybody brings a bottle of wine, whatever it is, and see if people go for it." He said they all went for it because they were all looking at ways to cut their expenditures
Yeah.
and they saved money and it made a difference. And the other piece is you have to look at the people around you. When you make those shifts, you have to either withdraw from people
Hmm.
or you have to deliberately choose to be around people who are going to reflect those same decisions.
Yeah, so it's again, it's not necessarily a sacrifice, but finding an alternative means to continue to live that lifestyle without spending the extra money. Which,
Well,
like your in your example too, you said, hey, they were going out with their friends all the time, and luckily they had a good friend set that was like, yeah, we'd love to save some money too, and
well, and they were
that's a
all
great
doing the same
idea.
things. They were all
Yeah,
doing the same thing. And that's the whole piece. It's sort of you have to be very intentional about the people you invite into your world.
yes,
And I know that sounds harsh and cruel, but the way I look at it is I define excellence as being better each day. It is not a destination, it's a process. So I don't care what your field is. If you're in my world, it could be radically different from mine, it could be mine, it doesn't matter. Make the commitment to make sure that tomorrow you're even a third of a percent, a tiny little piece stronger and better than you were today.
yeah.
And if you approach all the areas of your life that way, then I find that that becomes a really gentle and effective biosystem that pushes all of us forward.
Yep, I agree 100% because, and that's what funny, Monica, is my show's kind of just morphed into this thing where I tell stories of normal, everyday people that do extraordinary things, and like you, helping other people to learn how to manage their wealth, and instead of going from just living paycheck to hopefully having some of that financial freedom, that's extraordinary. And the fact that you came up with even your academy, the website to help people say, hey, here, look, I've developed these tools, they can help you. Here it is. It's all laid out for you. That's extraordinary to me because when we learn these things and we have the ability to share them, we should. And I think it's great that you've developed a program like this because like we talked about before we started hitting the record button, there's so many people that really are never taught how to deal with money, manage money, all these sorts of things. So
Well,
it's fantastic.
the biggest hurdle is not the concepts, it's the emotions around it. So I'm convinced that 90% of success really is between the ears, right on top of that brainstem. It's really that reptile brain, it's the emotions. And when I look at that, everybody has a money story that we've inherited. Everybody. Okay. So I look, for example, at my mother and my parents. My parents got divorced when I was 6. My mother grew up in a family that was hard hit by the Depression and they didn't have enough meat. So when she was a child, her parents divided the meat and they gave a slightly larger portion to her brother. Okay. So
Hmm.
she always felt like she had to really push to get ahead. Her first job was between second and third grade.
Wow.
That was
Yeah.
the way she paid for her school clothes and shoes. So when she got divorced, all of those money fears came crashing down on her and they came crashing into our lives as well. So I'll give you an example. My mother really had this connection to making sure that if she started something new, she always started off on the right foot with her appearance, with her clothing, all of it. And I realized I do the same thing. I
Hmm.
inherited that.
Yeah, we learn from our parents, don't we? We pick up
Right. And we don't
their
even realize that we're doing it. Okay. And so that's one of those things that a lot of people don't really understand. So when I look at this, it's like, okay, the first part of the program is about understanding what that wealth mindset is, understanding what risk is. Okay. And risk is just the chance that something could go wrong. And so it's sort of like, how do you manage risk? How do you approach it?
And that is, for me, that's always been a tough thing because, everything that's in your control, obviously you can control, but
Right.
sometimes there's things, like your job, if you have a regular job that you go to, there's no guarantee that you're going to have that job tomorrow. What
Correct.
happens if the company folds? What happens if, they say, oh, you know what, we don't need your position, so those are risks that you can't really manage, but you can in a way, right, Monica? I think you're probably getting to that
I
because
am.
that's where this all comes into, right?
Right. So let me use your example because you mentioned the job.
Hmm.
If you're working for somebody else, you have to be careful and you learn who do you want to work for? Truly. Like if you have the opportunity, there was something many, many years ago when I first started working, I worked in the energy sector. And at one point, I was recruited by Enron. And I looked at that and I said, you're offering me a lot of money to go over there, but I'm not sure I understand how you make money. And
Hmm.
they looked me in the eyes and said, trust us, we do. And I
Yeah.
said, I'm not okay with that. That
Thank
was one of
goodness
the
you didn't trust them. Yeah.
Right, that was one of the best decisions I made, okay, bar none. So when you look at that, you have to look and say, "Okay, is this a firm I wanna be associated with? Is this a job I wanna do?" Yes, we all have to do jobs we don't wanna do, but there are certain things that you have to decide you're not willing to do, okay? And as you progress in your life, there may be times when you're at a difficult stage or whatever, you still have to make those decisions. When we look at risk, for example, let's take the risk of driving. Do you drive?
As little as possible, but I do.
Okay, fair enough. We all live in this country, and we do. And so I live in Texas. Driving is absolutely required where I
Yeah,
am.
you have to, right? You're probably not in where you could just walk next door and get what you need, right?
Not even close. I mean, it's funny. Well, anyways, there's a grocery store that's now about a mile away from me. It moved in, they built it out. It's close, but it's not something, especially during Texas summer, where I would want to do my shopping and then walk back.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
I could if I had to. Okay. But
Yep.
here's the thing about this. You think about driving, okay? You can drive, which means you choose to accept the risk of driving. What's the risk? Something happens and you have an accident. You could be injured. You could be financially risk. You can ignore it. You can turn around and say, I'm not driving. I refuse to take this on. You can say, I'm going to let somebody else drive. I can transfer to somebody else. I can transfer the risk to an insurance company.
Hmm.
So you can retain the risk. You can walk away from it. You can transfer the risk. There are different mechanisms, and we make these decisions all the time. We need to, the more you learn about money, the more you learn how to assess your risk, what you're comfortable with doing, and what you're not. So, the
Yeah.
first part of the program is about how to think about money, what a true mindset is for wealth, but more importantly, how to shift how you think and feel about it, how to understand where you are emotionally on it, where you want to go, and how to make those shifts over time. So that's part of it. So you're learning a psychological
Yeah.
process. And then on top of that, at the same time, what we do is we build out certain financial defenses. So let me give you an example. What's the first benefit you should get when you get a job? If you have to work for somebody else.
For me, it'd be healthcare benefits.
Okay. Really? I want those, and those are critical for my people. But the first one you get is if you have to work for a living and your employer offers it, the first thing I want you to look for is long term disability insurance.
Yeah, I love that because, it is funny you say that because my employer just started offering long term and short term disability.
Awesome.
And I was like, I got to jump on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that the premiums were pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, they were there, especially through the employer. It was not much.
Right. And that's the whole thing. So if your employer offers it, you want to get this. Now, hopefully, if the employer offers it, you pay the premium. And the reason for this is when you pay the premium with money that is already been taxed, after tax money, if God forbid you need to collect the proceeds on that insurance policy, you have to say, look, I'm injured, I'm sick, I can't work for this period of time. That money comes to you without paying taxes on it, at least on the federal level. Okay. And
Hmm.
that's what's so critical. You need to replace that income. And that's where I would say to people, that's where you start. And then when you go into the health insurance, you do that. Once we build out the financial defenses, then we look at building the foundation. And the foundation, then we work into things like your cash flow and how do you build out that emergency fund and how do you manage that?
Yeah. And
So go ahead.
with that fund, is it still, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, Monica, but I know for years people always told me you want to have so many months' salary saved up in the bank in case you lose a job. Is that still a thing today?
You know, I understand rules of thumb are easier for people to quote,
Hmm.
but the reality is I teach my people to assess it from a different perspective. Every year we're looking at cash on hand, and every year we're saying, what's your real risk of something adverse happening? So, for example, when people approach retirement, I actually want to see debt reduction, but
Hmm.
I also want to see that cash flow go up. Why? Because I don't want people to have to from their retirement savings early or at a higher degree than they anticipate.
Gotcha.
So, and I saw this in 2008 when people had cash on hand and there was a market reduction, when there was a correction and
Hmm.
the values on their assets went down by 40% in some cases, those who had cash on hand could leave those assets alone if they were appropriate and allow
Yes.
them to recover. Okay.
Yep. And, a perfect example for that. Sorry, I just, because this just
Oh,
sparked
it's
something
great.
for me, Monica, but was, for myself, I had cash on hand. I had a bunch of investments with my Ks and things like that. And, we hit that crash back there in '08, '09. And, I was just like, well, it's all right because that's money that I'm not thinking about right now. I'm young enough. It'll rebound. I know I'll get the money back. But on the other hand, my parents had just retired. And all of their accounts, they like the year before, all of their accounts just almost got wiped out by that. So luckily they had cash on hand. But yeah, that's definitely, I can see why that cash on hand is very important, especially as you get closer to retirement.
And then another thing that I look at is I look at Roth and I look at Roth IRA and Roth 401k, and I walk people into how to use the system to maximize their results. And the reason why I do this is Roth IRA is it's probably the most important and most powerful account type in the system. And there's so many different facets to it, but it's one of those things where once you get into retirement, we know we have required minimum distributions.
Hmm.
But if we can actually say, all right, so we know we have some things you have to take out, but let's say you have an unplanned expense, a child gets married, you decide to take a vacation, something happens, and you want to pull more money out. I want to be sensitive and take it where I can so that we don't take you into the next tax bracket.
Gotcha.
And so, one of the things I look at people and I say, there's this system and I want you to learn how to use the system so that you can maximize your control over what happens to you in your financial life. And it's really the fact that, for example, I know that this happens a lot. People get pitched at every day. Once you get to a certain point where you're successful, people know you within the community, you're going to receive that pitch constantly. I get mail at my house, people pitching to me, to my kids. It's amazing. People don't know how to use the system. They don't know whether somebody is giving them the advice they need. They look to people that they know, and that's not necessarily the reality. You need to understand that you're building a team. If you're the CEO of your life, you're building out and hiring people to actually manage for you, but they report to you.
Yeah.
No one should care more about your financial condition than you.
And that makes total sense because it doesn't matter to me whether you make a lot of money, right? Or vice
Right.
versa. It doesn't matter to you whether I make a lot of money, but it matters to me if I make a lot of money or manage that money, whatever money I do have correctly, right?
Well, and here's the other piece of all of that, okay? I look at that and I say, okay, so the program that I built was designed because I've seen too many people get pitched at. I've seen too many things get pushed. And I'm like, all right, stop and take a step back. I want you to understand what's being put in front of you. And I want you to understand what you want, whatever it is, and your options to getting there so that you can hire and fire accordingly. So
Yep.
the program is designed to take a step back and before anything else happens to give you that knowledge and the skills and the confidence to be able to make those decisions.
And then I think Monica on your website, is it course one? Is that what it's called? Is that the
Yeah.
like the beginner course?
Yep.
And
Okay.
then so if someone were to come to, if someone was to come to
Okay.
Harmony Wealth Academy, come to Harmony Wealth Academy. And so their first step would be to go to course one, right? And
Yes.
can you give a little bit of for the listeners, what that kind of entails, what that gets them prepared for?
The first thing that I would say to people is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit down and you're going to go in and you're going to get a welcome from me, a welcome from us, but it's going to be the emotional side, the psychological side. And really, what I'm looking at is very short, direct information given to you, 5 to 10 minutes, where you're going to do exercises on your mindset a day. I know time is crunched and it's at a premium.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're going to do mindset pieces and you're going to walk through building your fences. Why? Because when your mind is in the right place and you have the tools to be able to manage things, and you have the confidence in knowing that if you get knocked down, you're going to get right back up. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to go forward and start dealing with the cash. Now, one of the things that I have people do, and this is based on experience, I have them hook up their bill paying account or their expenditures, whether it's one or two counts, wherever their debit card is coming from, whatever they're spending, whatever bills they pay. I have that hook it up. I have them hook it up to our financial management software, okay, financial planning software. We use eMoney, which is owned by Fidelity, and we use it. They hook up that account. We're going to leave that alone while they're building out their fences. Why? Because at the end of the first few weeks, we're going to flip a switch and they'll be able to see where their money is going. And the important thing for them to do with that is to understand, okay, where did my money go? Was I aware of what I was doing? Was I not aware of what I was doing? Where are my opportunities for change? And then we're going to walk into the cash management piece where we're dealing with the debt reduction as well as the emergency fund expenditures.
Nice.
And I have some experiences with this. I had a young lady call me. She was a young exec. Her firm paid for her to meet with me, and she had gotten herself into some financial difficulty. Her husband was in federal law enforcement,
Hmm.
and they made a decision. They borrowed money from family, and they decided to do debt reduction at an aggressive pace. And I said, "Great, where's your emergency fund?" And she got very, very angry with me. "I don't need an emergency fund." I said, "What happens if you can't work?" And
Yeah.
she said, "Why would that ever happen?" Okay. So I said, "What happens if you're not working? Something happens to your job, your husband's job, whatever, and you don't have an emergency fund. Why would that ever happen?" Okay. 1 or 2 weeks after the shutdown, she was
Yeah.
laid off. Okay.
Yep.
And the result is you have to move forward. It doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 number. Okay. But you have to fund that emergency fund while you're paying that debt. And
Yeah,
if
and
you
that makes
don't,
sense. Yeah.
and what happens is if you're taking on a chance that nothing's going to happen, but if something happens is what happens with that emergency fund is you're going to wind up back in debt.
Right, because
You
you'll start
didn't.
using credit cards or you'll start
Correct.
doing whatever, right, just to make
Correct.
ends meet until you get that next job, and
Correct.
then you're behind the 8 ball again.
Yep. And so the point that I was trying to make, you really desperately need to have that sense of having both. It's a foundation that rests on two pillars, not one. And once you learn how to manage that, when we can start building up, we can start talking about learning about the retirement system, learning about the tax system. I'm not an accountant. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your taxes. I
Right.
want you to understand a lot, enough to be able to understand what type of tax professional you may want to use, under what circumstances, and how to move forward with it. Okay. And so we go through all of these different areas of it, including to some degree some of these estate planning. So let me ask you a question.
Yes.
Do you know of anybody who's died without having a will?
Well, technically, yes, but so my father-in-law passed. They did not have a will, but my mother-in-law was still alive. So in Ohio law, everything just transferred to her. And then we got a will for her once, he passed on.
So it's very common. Some people estimate between 60 to 70% of the US population does not have anything done. And when that happens, you are taking this massively huge risk. What I want people to do is to understand you're better off choosing how things happen than letting it slide. So we
Right.
walk through some of those different things. We walk through all those different pieces. The objective is to put you in a place where you know issue by issue, task by task, how you want to proceed and you're able to march to it. Because the truly financially free take care of all of this stuff.
Yeah, it makes sense to me because, I mean, I'm just thinking about, even if you did have a lot of wealth and didn't have a will, say it's just me, right? And I have, and maybe even it's not a lot of wealth, but maybe it's enough to get me through, the rest of my life per
Right.
se. If I don't have a will, the state's probably going to get all that, or the government, somebody, right?
Well, if you're still alive, let's put it this way. Okay,
And I'm talking if I were to pass,
okay, but
that then that money would.
think about Britney Spears.
Hmm.
Okay. She did not have any of her documents done. And whether you agree about with what happened to her or not, when she was in a position where she was deemed vulnerable
Hmm.
and not able to manage for herself or whatever happened, her father stepped in. If she had actually set up her own trust and set things up with an attorney, if she had worked with an attorney who said, you know what, you don't think anything's going to happen, but it might. So, under the worst circumstances, what would you want? What would you not want? Who would you want to deal with it? And
Yeah.
how would you want it to go?
And I could see the relation there too, like to a living will or, a do not resuscitate order, right? So sort of things like that. What do you want to do to make decisions even easier for your family and have pre-made those decisions, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
really what we're looking at
and
is saying, what are we going to
that
do with this if something
that's the
happens?
piece that drives me crazy. Because let's put it this way, okay? People think, oh, it's just about who's going to unplug me. No,
Right.
usually there's a lot of steps between illness, injury, and death. There's a lot of steps in between. And all the way along, who has the authority? Had a situation, we had a family event in Colorado, and my mother flew out there. My mother had had surgery a few days prior. It was amazing that she got on the plane, but she did. She was determined. All of her grandchildren in one place, she was there. Okay. Absolutely determined to be there. So my mother got there and we needed to get her some help. Okay. There was a situation that needed to be resolved, not critical, but uncomfortable. And it really needed to be dealt with. Thank God my mother was awake. Thank God my mother was able to say to the ER docs, this is my son. This is my daughter. You can talk to them.
Yeah.
If she hadn't have been awake, we wouldn't have had the authority to do anything for her.
Yep.
And that's the piece. Who do you want to be able to deal with that if you're out of it? Okay. And it's not even a question of, permanent thing. It's one of
No,
those
it
things.
could be temporary. Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you said, we talked earlier about the risk of driving, right? You get in a car accident and something happens. Do you have documentation to let the hospital know what you want to have done? You
Well,
know?
it's even worse than
And
that. It's even worse than that. Think about it this way. Okay. You have children, right?
I do not have children. No.
Okay. So I didn't know that. But imagine here's the situation. My husband at one point was having an adverse reaction to some medication that
Hmm.
they gave, and I had to go pick him up. And we had two kids who were very little at the time. Okay. And I went and I was thinking to myself, all right, I'm here in a city at the time, Philadelphia, without family. If something happens, who has the authority to pick them up from school? Who
Right.
has the authority to interface? Who would make that decision? And without having legal documentation, the state comes in and makes that decision. They land in foster care for
Yep.
God knows how long until either I'm awake and able to respond or available. I didn't want that. So when you look at that, you say, okay, I need to make those decisions. I have a very close friend went abroad to go visit some family. She was gone for 7 days with her husband. Her children, her daughters, were at home with her mother. Her mother didn't have medical power of attorney, and her daughter needed medical care. And somehow or other, they were able to get a hold, okay, of my friend,
Hmm.
and she was able to log online to give her mother the permission and the authority to do it.
Yeah.
Had that not been available, there would have been an extreme problem.
Yeah. I mean, even looking back to, when you talked about your mother, luckily she was able, in her situation, was able to tell the doctors, yes, you could talk to my daughter. But you're right, with HIPAA laws, things like that, if she wasn't awake,
Right.
they even though you were there, they wouldn't be able to ask you any questions or really tell you anything either if you weren't documented as, someone that can have the information.
Or even think about it this way. I'll give you another example. My son at one point was in, my oldest, the one who's in the army. He was at school and he had an accident while running.
Hmm.
Okay. And he was in the Corps Cadets at A&M, and he tripped and fell. And if I wound up going down there and I didn't have a medical power of attorney on him,
And
okay,
because now he's an adult, right?
because now he was an adult, he was able to turn to the ER doctor and say, "That's my mom. I'm out of it. Talk to her." And that was it. And if he had not been able to say that, we would have had a problem. Even further, I didn't have a general power of attorney on him. So if he needed me at that time to go to the university and let them know, like if he had, God forbid, wound up in the hospital,
Right.
no one would have notified the university and he would have had a problem. So it's one of those things when your kids go off to college or when they turn 18, get that medical power of attorney, get that general power of attorney so that your child isn't left floundering and you don't have to go through the process of petitioning a judge.
That is a great that's just great advice in general because you're absolutely I don't think a lot of people think about when their kids go to college, about what happens. I mean, they know that, you've got the nurse or the, whatever medical department they have generally on campuses, but you're right. If something happens to your son, especially think about it, if you're a parent across the country, you know,
Exactly.
that could be extremely scary. So it's great that you're bringing not only up the financial things, but some of these other things too, like having, a will at the end of life so you could determine where your things will go.
Well, and it's really just a question of literally taking stock and taking ownership and saying, what do I need to do? And how do I need to take care of this? It is so much less expensive to actually get in front of it than it is to get up behind it. I mean, even with the medical power of attorney, I remember going to the local hospital and saying, I need a medical power of attorney just in case. Okay. And I need this. I have a medical power of attorney. I gave it to one of my brothers. They're both doctors. And several years ago, I needed to have surgery. And my brother was there and available on the phone with the doctor. But on the other hand, I had my son, who was an adult, right there available to me.
Right.
Okay. You have to really stop and think, let's make this simple.
Hmm.
Who do I want making decisions? Who do I not want making decisions? And that's
Yeah.
critical.
And remove those decisions if you can make them yourself ahead of time.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things like you think about this. I one time lost a young colleague who died in a motorcycle crash, 26 years old. But let's imagine that instead of dying, that he had been injured. Without that medical power of attorney, without that general power of attorney, who would have notified his employer? Who would have gone to his landlord because he lived in an apartment and said, he's not here. I need to make sure that the bill gets paid. Who would have had the authority to do that? Make things easier so that you can get what you want. I'll give you another example. Like, for example, documents. People used to talk about putting them in a safe deposit vault.
Right.
Here's the problem. If you don't give the person that you want to be able to manage that the key and the authority to get into the vault, they have to go to court and petition for that.
Yeah.
Don't make life more expensive than it needs to be.
And that's great advice because you know what? We do some of those things trying to think, hey, we're making it safer. We're making it safer for us. If someone, someone breaks into my house, they can't steal my documents because now it's in a vault in a bank or, whatever it may be. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes by trying to make things easier for ourselves, we actually make it a lot more difficult.
So, one of the things that we do is if anybody is a planning client of us or if they're part of the Wealth Academy, two different divisions, if you are doing that, you have access to e-money. E-money on the client side, I can't get into this piece, has a vault. And if you put your documents up into that vault, let's say you've got somebody who's across the country, or you want to make sure somebody has access to it, you can give that other person access to it so they can get your documents and pull them down and say, look, here's my copy of this. Here we go. Can I please take care of so and so?
Yeah. That's great. I mean, that's a great tool. And with the Wealth Academy that you're doing, and I know there's the Wealth Academy and what is it? I'm going to mess this up. So sorry, Monica. Because it's the same. It's Harmony Assets. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Harmony.
we're an RIA, so we're a small fiduciary boutique firm. And so there's also the asset management piece where we manage people's money. And there's a hard line between the two.
Hmm.
Okay. So there's financial planning over there, there's asset management. And yes, I do that. But my main focus here is to talk about the Wealth Academy. And when somebody's a participant in the Wealth Academy, unless something blows up and something needs to be dealt with immediately, then we deal with that immediately and that transfers over. The Wealth
Gotcha.
Academy is designed for you to get the information you need to make decisions that make sense to you. Not everybody who comes to us in the Wealth Academy is going to be a good fit for us on. Right.
It's funny that you're saying that because that was going to be my next question. Because, when I went through the website and stuff, the vibe that I got for it is it's more about empowerment as opposed to an info dump. But so who would be the ideal candidate for the Wealth Academy? It doesn't have to be, you have to have this, this, and this, but, should people come in with a certain mindset, that are looking for help, or who would you identify as, what type of people would you recommend coming into the Wealth Academy?
Okay, what I want are people who are committed to actually taking ownership, who are not afraid to fail, who understand they're going to make mistakes, but they're going to pick themselves right up and learn. They're not going to be judged, but I'm looking for people who are the discipline to make daily changes and understand that small daily changes will compound over time.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's funny you say that because I've seen a lot of, everything going on with the country right now and Doge and all that and the money they save. And I've heard people say, oh, well, it's only 37 million, which is like 0.002% of the complete budget. I'm like, yeah, but if you find 32 million here and 32 million there, it starts adding up. These little bits add up, which 32 million, trust me, between you and I is probably a ton of money that we would never see. But,
Well,
it's the same
think
thing with
about it
us.
this way. Do people buy lottery tickets, right?
Yeah, they do. Absolutely.
Right. So, okay, so that's the dream. And I'll admit that I will on occasion buy the Powerball or the Mega Millions. But here's the thing, think about how much money that is and how much that would affect your life. But if you don't have the mindset in there, you're not going to make good decisions with it. And
No,
that's
and
why the vast majority of lotto winners, okay,
you're reading my
go
mind, Monica. You're
exactly
going right where I was going to go. Yep.
right. If your mindset doesn't shift and if your psychology of how you want to use these tools doesn't shift, you will not be able to sustain it. Okay. What I'm looking for are people who are determined to succeed, who are like, okay, where do I go? How do I learn this? Can I trust this? I'm a fiduciary. I'm on the hook. I've been a certified financial planner for a while. I am on the hook for what I say to you here. I'm on the hook. If somebody comes to me and asks me a question and I answer it, I'm on the hook for it.
Right.
And
As
so,
professional advice, right?
correct. And it's as a professional, I have a fiduciary. As a fiduciary, I have a fiduciary duty to put you first. So, what I'm looking for here and what I do best with are people who say, okay, I want to learn how to take ownership. Now, there are some people who want to do that in a planning environment, and under
Hmm.
those circumstances, I'll do that. And then there are people who are looking to say, okay, I want to learn how to understand the system so that I can make those decisions. Maybe I'll hire you to manage the assets, maybe I won't, but I'm here to learn.
Right.
So that's that. And, one of the things that I've done for people, and I've realized this, is that we're all scattered. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How many 401k accounts do you still have?
I think I have about 4 of them.
Okay. And your wife?
I think she has 1.
Okay. So that's normal. But I've also seen people with a lot more. And one of the things that happened was I had a client that I adore, and they hired me to help them get organized before one of them wasn't going to be with us due to
Mm,
illness.
mm.
And it was an opportunity to help them get organized and get control. What I would urge people to do is to make a present for themselves and for their family to get their finances organized so that they can see what they have and they can make it easier long before they find out there's an issue.
Right.
So that's part of it.
And Monica, in a case where, someone has multiple 401ks, is there a benefit to combining those all together into one account? I mean, I could see that I could make that easier for my wife if I passed on, right? She would know one place to go to get the money, but, does that help?
Okay, so 401ks The money that comes from retirement accounts, you have to treat with extra special care. And the regulators are very clear on this. And the
Hmm.
reason why is because that's where most people have most of their money. Okay. So there's a rule for it. You can leave it where it is. You can roll it into a new account. You can you can roll it to your new employer if your employer's account or plan allows you to do that. You can roll it into an individual IRA or you can take a distribution. Okay. So what I talk to people about is first, you have to understand what your options are. If you like the investments in the current 401k, you can leave them there. If your new 401k will allow you to roll the money over and you like the new 401k, you can leave it there. Okay. Now, if you want to roll it into an IRA, the question is why? Do you want a broader spectrum? Do you want active management? What's the reason that's driving you to roll it over? And under those circumstances, you can do that. So the short answer to your question is for simplicity's sake, people like the idea of keeping 401k money in one or two accounts
Hmm.
or simplifying and not
Yeah.
having as many places. However, when you do that, you need to be very careful that you're making it, you're making the best decision for you. Now, there's something else that goes on. You need to be very clear when you manage this. Let's say you roll it into an IRA.
Hmm.
You want to keep all of the 4K money in an IRA that never has money that came from an IRA that you contributed to outside of 401k. You want to keep it separate.
Gotcha.
There's protections on money that is from 401k accounts or retirement accounts. Why? Because it's protected up to certain dollar amounts. Mostly for 401k money, it's protected the sky. It's a high number, okay? And it shifts. And it may be, but you don't want to put yourself in a position where you commingle money that's not from a 401k, that's from a standard IRA, and have issues with that. I don't want to give you hard and fast numbers
Yeah,
with it.
yeah. But that could cause some tax issues in the
No,
future,
not
right?
tax
No?
issues.
Oh,
Take
okay.
OJ Simpson,
Hmm.
okay? OJ Simpson, why couldn't they attach his pension?
I don't know.
Because it came from retirement money.
Okay.
So even though there was an outstanding judgment against him, they couldn't attach his retirement money. Now, if you get into a car accident, God forbid,
Hmm.
okay, or you get sued, God forbid, let's say you're in a profession where you get sued. What happens if you get sued and the amount of protection on the money because it's not because you commingled those employer based
Mm. I got you. I
plans?
see what you're saying. Yep.
From the perspective of it, without getting into technical terms, the way I look at it is this: rollover money goes into an account that's rollover money. Okay. If you want to keep it at an employer or you want to roll it into a new employer, you have that right. If you don't mind having four different accounts and you want to keep it where it is, you have that right for simplicity's sake.
Hmm.
Okay. Or whatever it is, you have the right to make those decisions. You need to keep into account and just be very careful to protect it and to keep employer sponsored retirement plan money
Separate.
labeled so that you
Yep.
understand what that is. Don't collapse everything down so much that you commingle where it came from.
And that makes sense. That makes perfect sense to me, Monica. And thanks for that, that information because, I didn't even think about some of the protections that you have with keeping it in a 401k account. Like you said with OJ Simpson with the lawsuit, right? They couldn't touch it. And, it's funny because I didn't know that. But it's good to know that that at least affords you some protections for down the road, but
Massive,
hopefully we're not, yeah, hopefully we're
massive.
not getting sued.
Well, but you
But,
know what? Here's the thing. Okay. I look at it this way. If I play defense, defense wins championships.
mhm,
So if I teach you how to play defense and you feel more protected, what do you care?
yeah. I mean, that's a huge win to me, actually. So to
Well,
feel
and
more
it,
protected, right?
yeah, it's one of those things. It's like one of the things that we do in the beginning part of this. I have never had a property and casualty license, but I want people to understand what property and casualty insurance is concept wise. And then I want them to understand why, for example, and I'm happy to introduce people to a plethora of different insurance agents who can explain this. You don't want necessarily to have the cheapest car insurance,
Yeah,
okay? Or homeowners
exactly.
insurance. Right, okay? So it's one of those things where it's like, look, you need to understand and manage the risk and get what you need. I had a situation where many years ago where someone came to me and asked me, did she need a umbrella policy?
Hmm.
And the answer was, well, tell me a little bit more about your situation. And I knew that they had quite a bit of investment real estate. And I
Okay.
said, okay, you have more than what you have in terms of your coverage in the event of an accident. And her comment was, yes. I said, uh-huh. How is that titled? Whenever we walked into that. And I said, look, you need the umbrella policy just in case you get into a car accident and you're sued for more than what the coverage is. And I asked her how expensive the umbrella policy was. And at the time, it was about $160 per year for
Oh,
1
geez.
million. Nothing.
Yeah, that.
So she went through that and she said, okay. So she wound up talking to an insurance agent, buying that coverage. A couple months later, about 4 or 5 months later, she had a car accident. She was at fault,
Oh,
concussion and soft tissue injury. And she and her husband were hit with a lawsuit for $2 million.
my goodness.
So long story short, we wound up talking about this. And what happened when they did this was they wound up with a better quality attorney because more money on the line for the insurance agent.
Hmm. Hmm.
And none of their personal assets were at risk. So it became a very wise choice for
Very,
them.
and that was a very good way to manage that risk. That it was an unforeseen risk, right? She didn't know it was going to happen, but she protected herself in case it did happen. Which, yeah, that's great because I don't think like here when we talk about insurance, like in Ohio, we by law you have to have car insurance, right? You have to
Right.
have
But
at
you
least.
don't have to have a lot.
You don't. No, the state minimum, I think, is liability, which basically means, hey, it'll cover the damage to another car. That's about it.
Right. And so that's the question. Look, there are always people driving around who are underinsured and uninsured. The question is, as you build up wealth, what are the chances that you're going to have a problem? I don't want you taking on so much insurance that it
Exactly,
becomes
that you're now insurance poor, right?
correct. But I mean, around here in Texas, the cost of insurance has gone through the roof. Absolutely gone through the roof. Okay. But the reality is that's communicating something to us.
Mhm.
So homeowners insurance has gone up sky high, as well as car insurance has gone up sky high. And that's communicating to us, A, the values of the homes have gone up,
Yep.
and B,
There's a
things
lot of
like
risk with the cars, yeah.
correct. And so you have to think about that. Like, I live in Texas. The speed limit is high. There are so many trucks around here. That same person, by the way, told me that at one point she would not ever drive a regular sedan in her life in Texas. And I asked her why, and it was because trucks kept hitting her car.
My goodness, yeah.
And she just wanted to be seen.
Yeah.
Okay.
The same thing happened to my wife. My wife was driving a little, man, this was years ago, but it was like a Hyundai Accent, just a little hatchback two-door car. And she's on the highway in a dead stop traffic. There's a semi behind her, and he
Oh
just starts pushing her. He didn't even see her
my
and was
gosh.
just pushing her down the road. And
Oh my
it's like,
God.
yeah, she was freaked out. And I'm like, after that, she's always had bigger cars now, SUVs and stuff. So she could be seen. The funny thing is, though, her car at the time was lime green. And I'm like, how do you
You
miss
gotta
that?
see it. How did he not see
I
that?
know. I just
It's
think the
that
thing
space
was,
differential.
yeah, I think what happens is as they were stopping, he pulled up behind her and then he saw the car in front of her go, but because of the hood of the car, he couldn't see her anymore. And so
Right.
he started going and just kept pushing her. And I
I'm
was
glad
like,
that she was okay and survived that.
yes. Luckily, it was at slow speeds because there was ice on the roads and stuff
Right.
like that, which is why it was slowed down. But yeah, it's crazy that you say that because yeah, definitely want to be seen if you're getting hit by trucks.
That's the whole point of all of this. You sort of look and you say, where is my risk? Where's my risk not? What do I want? And if I can do things to mitigate, if I feel that it is a legitimate risk, can I mitigate it? Can I transfer it? I mean, we mitigate all
Exactly.
the time. We wear
Absolutely.
seatbelts. Okay. We have certain safety equipment in cars. I'm old enough to remember when not every car
Yeah,
had
me
a
too.
had an airbag, right?
Yeah, or my parents had cars at some points that didn't even have seat belts in the back seat,
Exactly.
you know?
Well, my mother used to do this. I'll never forget one time she was driving. I was in the front seat and she had to come to an abrupt stop and her arm shot out
The
to block
arm,
me.
yep.
And I was like, wait, the laws of physics. And my mother, who studied math and physics, she's like, I know these better than you. She's like, this is just habit. Okay.
Yeah, it's so funny though because that probably came because I know, for a long time, back in the 60s, it was just
Right.
lap belts, right? We didn't have shoulder belts, and stuff. And before the 60s, there was nothing, a big metal dashboard or a windshield you could go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about that, like I'll never forget having conversations with my mother-in-law. She didn't understand why I was so insistent on car seats for our kids.
Yeah,
And it was like, look, this is not me being ridiculous. Oh, well, the kids sat in the window well and they had a great time.
exactly. In the back window. Yep,
Okay, so first of all, that's a violation of federal law at this point. And second of
exactly.
all, but second of all, it was like, look, do you know how much steel there was on those cars back then?
So
And she's
much.
like, well, and I said, yeah. Do you know how much bigger they were?
Yep, heavier.
Were
Exactly.
heavier, bigger, more steel. It's not the same thing. So many of these cars are not that big anymore.
No. No, and it is weird. I mean, but yeah, it's weird that, the way that they're designed now too is the cars are designed to crumple, where the old cars were decided just like they'd penetrate anything.
That's the other thing. Like, I'll never forget that when they had the third seat on the SUVs. And I remember talking to a car salesman. He said, don't get a car with a third row. And I said, okay, why not? Tell me why not. He said, well, that's the crumple zone on this car. Okay.
Yep,
No,
makes sense.
I don't want anybody crumbling back there.
Yep.
So
Yeah, especially when you're putting your kids in the car. That's definitely not something that you want for sure.
now
But
I know that the design has been updated. This was
yeah,
many years ago. So I'm not, whatever, but it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, these are mitigations. We do this all the time. So we retain, we transfer, we mitigate, or we completely deny. Those are part of our everyday decision making process.
yeah, and
So,
that's so why would we do that with our money too, right? And our
right.
financial freedom.
Right. And then the other piece is when you understand that so many of these things are so much easier to do than it is to correct for it. So one of the things I walk through with people is identity theft issue.
Hmm.
Okay. So we have two-factor authentication on everything we do. I am the identity theft Nazi. Why? Because many years ago, God, this was many years ago, my husband was working in New York and he had a medical issue. And somehow or other, his identification, all of his stuff, somehow or other got used by somebody for medical care he didn't need.
Wow.
And it took us a long time to resolve that.
Yeah.
It's like, look, let's talk about what we can do and how do you fix that? How do you be aware of that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. No, you know what I love about this too, Monica, from everything that you've said so far. So I know, it's just, you're not just throwing information about to people. You're trying to empower folks to make the best decisions for themselves, and to not only that, but take that emotion out of it, so to speak, and kind of think about things a little bit more logically, right?
Well, that's part of it, but I also want them to channel the emotion. I know, for example, emotions are motivators. Okay. So
Yeah, they are.
right. So if you care about something, I want you to channel the decision in line with what you care about so that you're motivated to stay with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love
Okay.
that.
And so here's the thing. I'm asking for you to channel those emotions and channel what matters to you and understand you're not living to work. You work to live. Okay. What's
Hmm.
important to you? What matters? What keeps you up at night? What are you willing to sacrifice for? Once we know what that is, it's a lot easier for you to actually make those changes. And they don't even feel like changes when you do them in small,
Yeah.
manageable pieces.
And it's funny you say that because it's something I could go to. In my profession, I'm what you may have never heard of it, but I'm a Scrum Master, which is essentially is a fancy term for a project manager for technology, right? And that is exactly how we work is we build the software in small little chunks and just iterate. and continue to build and continue to build. And so to me, now you say this, it's an iterative fashion. It's a way that we can it's not all at once. You're not saying, okay, stop spending all your money, put it all in the savings account or in something else. You're
Right.
saying, look, we're going to make small incremental changes that you can accommodate into your life and that will eventually help you get that financial freedom that you need.
Love the fact that you say iterate because I use that all the time. And I'll give you an example of something that I think is the perfect metaphor for it. You cannot climb Mount Everest by showing up at the mountain the first time and going straight up to the top. You will die. You will not succeed. Okay. So instead, you have to prepare for it. You go, you acclimate, you leave. Then you prepare, you go up maybe to base camp. You
Hmm.
stay there for a little bit of time, you leave. You have to take it in steps in order to be able to go straight to the top. And it takes time and acclimation. The fitness metaphor is the best one I have
Yeah.
because the reality is, as your goals grow, your skills grow, you go further along. Now, I hope people can understand I am post pneumonia on this podcast. So I'm in this healing stage. I was healthy before and I got knocked down. Now it's time for me to rebuild. Okay. Now it's time to get my health in line, get everything put together, and then start rebuilding fitness. It takes time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
The
you
time
don't
is
just show up at like you said with your, with the Mount Everest, but same thing with the gym. You just don't show up at the gym and say, "Okay, I'm fit." Right? It's
right.
iterative. You got to start slow, make sure you don't hurt yourself, build things up and just add a little bit at a time.
Right. And here's the other piece. So my goal today, let's say, okay, I've been working out with the gym and I've been using the iFit program for a while. Okay. I like it. It works for me. But everybody has this. You have a goal. And then once you get to that goal, you set the new goal. Okay. And if you get knocked down, you get right back up. And by virtue of having done the work before, you're mentally prepared for that. But your system will respond faster. You make
Hmm.
better decisions. You have more resources to progress. And the
Yeah.
way I look at people and I say, look, what I do now will determine how well I live 30, 40 years ago. There's a book called Younger Next Year. Have you ever heard
Hmm.
of that?
I have not heard of that one.
Okay, it was written by two men. One was a doctor. He unfortunately died from cancer. And the other one was what I call a recovering attorney. Loved being an attorney, hated being an attorney, retired and got himself fit. Okay. And it's the lessons that they learn. So you get the scientific approach, you get the gentle approach, and then the attorney comes in and he tells it to you straight. And literally, it is one of the funniest books I've ever listened to on Audible in my life. I have been at the gym with the AirPods on, listening to this book, dying of laughter. And people looking at me going, what is wrong with her?
What is she listening to over there, right?
Yeah, like what could possibly be that funny while she's on a treadmill doing a okay. But the point is, I love that. And he talks about the fact that what you do with yourself physically in your 30s, 40s, and 50s determines what your 60s, 70s, and 80s look like. How well you think, how well you operate, how well you feel, and what happens to you. You have an absolute incentive to take care of yourself now for later. That fitness metaphor is the same one for every other area of your life, including finances.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it too, and I encourage people is when you understand what you're doing in one area, these habits, these mentalities, if you allow it and you cooperate with it, translate across all areas of your life. How you do anything is how you'll do everything.
Yeah.
If you go with that flow, it works.
I love that, Monica, because you're really telling people that, hey, we can teach you things, and of course we're going to focus a little bit on the financial side, but you also said we're going to, focus on the psychological side or the feelings and things like that. But you're essentially saying this is a potential to be a lifestyle change to help you live a better, more productive, iterative life, right?
Yeah, I want people to own their own lives. I want them to be in charge. I really do. I want to be in charge of my life. I do these processes with myself. I do them all the time. Okay. I'm not asking you to do what I'm not doing in my own world. Okay. And I also understand that sometimes I don't want to go to the gym. Okay. I
You're
don't
right.
want to go to the gym. I don't want to get up and take a short walk post pneumonia, but this is part of my process of healing. And I know I will feel better if I'm responsible with what I do and I do it within my parameters, but that I start doing it. So, what I'm asking people to do is if you want to take ownership of this area, these are skills, these are lessons you can use across the board, but we're going to work with you and do this on the financial piece.
Yeah, I love that, Monica. And, one thing I wanted to ask you, because we are talking, essentially about freedom or financial freedom, right? That's what our goal is. But why is that so hard for most regular folks to, kind of understand that or, get into that mindset of financial freedom? Because I think, and this is where I'm going. Like, I think our society, especially here in the United States, tells us, you know what, you got money, spend the money.
Part
Do
of
you
it,
think that has part to do with it? Sorry, go
that's
ahead.
part of it. The culture works against us all the time. There are a lot of us who inherited messages that we couldn't, we weren't worthy, it wasn't something for us. And that's part of it. We have an imposter syndrome. I have one. Okay. I have a brother who runs a residency program for surgeons. He has his own version of this. We talk about this all the time. We have everything we need is inside of us if we're willing to learn and learn how to channel it and step forward and say, okay, maybe I'm not confident now, but I'm going to acquire confidence and believe that this is something I'm built to do.
Yeah.
For me, I ask people to say, okay, you've inherited and you've absorbed the message that this is not for you. You can't do it. You don't know where to get the help. The reality is, just because you are at that place does not mean you have to stay there. You are not a plant. You are not a tree. You can move.
Right. We're not rooted in the ground, right?
We're not. Okay. You don't have to stay there. And I really want to encourage people to understand this is for regular people who are motivated to do it. I've seen people do it.
Yeah. And
I've
I
watched
mean,
people
people
do it.
could come to you really at any point in their financial life, right? And start this transformation,
It is,
essentially.
yeah. It is important to do it. It's hard. I don't necessarily want to ask a 70-year-old to do it.
Right, right.
Okay. But it is really just designed, where we're planning on offering a program starting in June for younger people who are just launching their lives. So I will let you guys know that we will be running that. And if people are interested in that, that is a slightly different program. We're going to add a few things that'll help people with understanding how to build a network, how to understand how to think about a career. And we're also going to be doing something if there's interest in how to plan for and what it is like buying your first home. Because I know a lot of people are sitting there saying, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do
Yeah.
this? Once you understand the process, once you understand what you need to do, it becomes a lot easier to get it done.
And Monica, that's fantastic because like we talked before, obviously, we started recording, but one of the things we talked about then was, in high school, they just or anything, you don't really get taught any of this financial stuff, right? Unless you go to a specific class like, an accounting class or something like that. And, so it's nice to see, folks like yourself that are coming out there and noticing that, hey, our younger people don't really have maybe not have the knowledge or didn't get the training or teachings, and saying, you know what, hey, we're here to help. If you need it, we're here.
Okay, so funny story about that I just want to tell you is my 27-year-old who's an officer in the army.
Hmm.
Okay. I adore him. And I'll never forget, he went off after he was commissioned, he went off to it's kind of like an induction, and they signed him up for all of his benefits. And one of which was the 401k, the TSP.
Hmm.
And he has heard me for years talk about how to work within the 401k, what the investments are, how to understand what they are. He's heard me give this guidance for years
Right.
to the
He
point
lived
where
with it, right?
my kids can actually quote me on a lot of it. And he walked off, and when it was him, he wasn't thinking about everything I told him. He actually was paying attention to the drill sergeants who were giving them information, the master sergeants who were giving advice and trying to answer questions. And he came home, he's like, "Oh, I'm just gonna do what the master sergeant said," and said something. And his brother looked at him and said, "What?"
Do you know who your mother is?
Right, that is what came out of his mouth, and I started laughing. But you and I both know that sometimes it's very difficult, especially when
Oh yeah.
people are in their 20s, to go to your parents. And sometimes I call that subcontracting it out. Like
Mhm.
when my kids were younger and I desperately wanted them to learn how to cook, they went to cooking classes, okay? Not just at school, but anything at Williams Sonoma, any other place where I could credibly send them where it was fun, where they learned how to cook. And they came home and yelled at me that I wasn't using the knife correctly. And they were right, okay? I was okay with that. The point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes we need to take the parent out of the equation so it doesn't become a battle.
Mhm.
And so I would look at parents and say, if you're willing to do this for your child and you believe your child is interested and receptive, great, because maybe that'll take you out of the equation and it doesn't have to be a battle between the two of you.
Yep. Yeah, it doesn't have to be, well, mom's saying it or dad's saying it, right? So, what do they know, right?
Right. Right. And I
The
got
old
that from
adage.
my own
Yep.
son. I got that from my own son. And it
It's like, it's not that you do that for a living or anything, mom.
right. It's yeah, never mind. It's okay.
No. Is there one thing for you that's tough about this academy or teaching folks? Is there like a common thread or something that's just really tough about this for you?
No, I have so much empathy for it because I understand it. I
Mhm.
understand that my mother's issues and the fears that all that created in the situation. Okay. And that people, it's not anybody's fault. The biggest thing that I want people to understand is that I'm not judging you. Okay. There's no judgment here. Whatever's happened has happened. I've seen people recover from all sorts of issues just because you got knocked down or something was difficult or you didn't achieve something that you wanted to, or you sit there and you go, why don't I know this?
Yeah.
The reality is, okay, so what? The question is, what do we do with it now? Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's no shame. There's literally no shame. That's the biggest thing. Once people understand that I know they can handle it, that I've seen people handle it just like them, okay? Nobody's at fault. The question is, what do you want to do from here on?
Yeah. And that's a great point. I love that your willingness though to teach people and take this to the next level because, like I said, a lot of us don't have that knowledge and have never really been taught properly how to do things. So I love the fact that you've got the online Wealth Academy, but not only that, you offer asset services if people want to go a little bit further, which is fantastic because same things. Trust me, I don't know all the right investments to make. So sometimes you need to have someone manage your assets for you that maybe are a little bit more into the market, right?
But it's part of it. I mean, I really love and I appreciate. I love what we do, and I love the team that I have that does it. So I do a lot of financial planning for people, and it's a question of literally saying, okay, what do you want? What are you building? What are you looking to protect? What are you looking to achieve? Okay. But that's where I'm literally working and giving advice and guidance. The academy is designed to teach you the skills so that you know how and when to hire somebody like me on the other side.
Yep. Do it at the
Okay.
right time. Yep.
Well, and not only that, do it with confidence that you're comfortable with what you've got. I've had people say to me, we hire those we know, like, and trust.
Hmm.
And I've looked at them and I've said, okay, how do you know this? They're like, oh, well, I know somebody who has money. How do you know that they have money? Well, they say they have money.
Mm.
Most of the people I know of who've been successful don't start off a conversation saying,
No.
okay, most of them don't do that. And then it's like, well, how do you judge them while they're driving that car? Well, the reality is,
Yeah. They
the
they could have
reality,
a $2,000 car payment on that, right?
right? Okay. And the people that I know of who are truly financially successful don't flaunt it. They
You're
are
right.
not necessarily the ones who have what you think they have. So,
Yep.
and then there's the other piece of if you don't know a lot of this stuff, are you actually looking at people and assessing their knowledge correctly?
Right.
And that's where it becomes tricky. So I also look at this and I'm like, okay, my industry will only get better when clients get stronger. And
Hmm.
I want that. It can't be done
Yeah.
from the top down. I want clients and general consumers to get stronger and stronger and stronger because they'll demand more from us and we will rise to the occasion or we
Yep.
won't be in business.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's usually how things work is that, it very not very often does it work from the top down, does it?
No, it doesn't. I
you
wish it
know?
did. It'd be so
Yeah,
much easier if we could just say, okay, everybody do better.
exactly. And then it just happened. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
No,
And
it doesn't. I want to make an offer to your people and
yeah,
basically say that anybody who comes through here, I will provide a link, which you will have. And if you want a consultation, I will offer that where it's basically a discussion. If you come into our program after that, we will talk about it. I will offer a discount on that. But reach out to me, talk to me. I'm here. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
yeah. And that's awesome, Monica. Thank you so much for offering that to the listeners. And, it really, hopefully that'll give our folks, that edge to just say, you know what, I'm going to take the lead.
The other thing that I'm doing, and it's going to start again in June, I looked at April 15, and every year I think of it as your financial report card.
Hmm.
How well did you do on what you said you were going to do? Okay. No judgment. I don't need the answer. But if you're not happy with your progress or you want more, there's that. I look at that and I think, for all the things that we do that are goal setting, there's a psychology to it. And I run a completely free group where we do goal setting, not financial, general goal setting. No pitch. Nobody is allowed to pitch in there. And it is a meeting where we get together, we go through some of the psychological components to goal setting, and once a month we reset the goals. We break it down into pieces based on a sound cognitive behavioral approach, and you literally can then start moving towards your goals and holding yourself accountable. It's an accountability feature and group in a non judgmental place. You're going to be the one who says, you know what? I made it. I did what I was going to do. I'm on track or not.
Yeah.
Okay. So if people want to do that, I'll give you the link. People can sign up for that. Again,
Excellent.
it's completely free. Literally, the only thing is we're not talking about finance in there. It is
Gotcha.
completely and totally free. Okay.
Excellent.
It's goal setting, it's light
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. I love that. Monica, is it okay if I switch gears on you a little bit? I have a little segment that I love to do. It's called Dude Q&A.
Oh, no.
It's supposed to be lightning round questions, just super
Go for
simple
it.
questions. But I'll ask you questions just based on your background. So far, I'll be honest with you, it has not been lightning because usually you'll give an answer and then I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And I'll ask a follow-up, but we'll do the best we can.
I'll give you short answers.
All right. Are you ready for, okay, the first one. What is the best money tip you've ever gotten?
Be intentional. Literally be intentional. Every dollar that you spend in one area is a decision not to do something else.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great point because you don't think about that. If you only have so many of those tools, right? That money
Right.
that we have, so you have to think wisely and be intentional of where those are going to go. That's fantastic. I love that, Monica. Next one, worst financial mistake either you've ever made or ever seen.
Oh, dear Lord. Wow. I think the worst financial mistake I've ever seen was that one individual, or actually, and I've seen this over and over again, where people literally do not plan for the future. And they think they can work indefinitely. And when they can't, they come up against a hard brick wall.
Yeah, and that's even with steel behind it. And yeah, exactly. No, I see. And
Reinforcement.
I was thinking about that as I was asking it, Monica, thinking back to when you said, well, why would that ever happen? Why would I ever lose? Why would I never not be able to work? Well, here we go. That life happens.
Yep. Yep.
If you had to have a choice between stocks or real estate, which would you choose?
I would choose both.
Both. So
Okay.
not one or the other.
No, real quick, think Harvard endowment.
Hmm.
Okay. 80% of the money that is in that endowment is tied up in illiquid assets. What are those? Real estate, private equity, and venture capital. It is expensive to get out. It takes time. You may not be able to sell it for an extended period. And usually, if you have to sell on a crunch, you're doing it at a discount.
Yeah, at a big loss, right?
Right.
From what
So,
your potential. Yeah.
correct. So, I like diversification. I like
Hmm.
putting things in different baskets. I do. But I never, ever, ever want to have everything tied up in any one thing. And I always try to make sure that there's an emergency fund, a cash reserve, all of that. Okay. So don't get greedy, diversify, spread it out. Don't do one thing to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah, excellent. That's great advice. Is there that you're aware of, and maybe there's not, but is there an app? Just thinking of technology, is there an app out there that every person needs for money? or that
No,
you would recommend? No?
no, no, mm-mm, no.
Anything you would
I wish there
recommend
was.
instead?
My intention is to turn the program into an app, but we're not there yet.
Not,
So,
yeah. Every iterative, right? Just like we
yeah,
talked about before, small steps, we build on it.
absolutely,
Yep.
absolutely.
Um, for you,
Okay.
coffee or cocktails, your budget splurge, what would you say out of those two?
I have a Starbucks habit. I'm not
I,
proud. I'm not proud. I fell in love with Starbucks when my kids were very little and it was an opportunity to get out of the house. I then went abroad and Starbucks was the non-smoking zone.
oh, yeah.
And it was the only place that I could go to where they were told to be polite to the customers and they didn't let people smoke. So I fell in love with them. I also love that they give people second chances. I love that it's a place that gives people a chance to restart and rebuild, and they promote and they develop from within, and they
Yeah.
give all sorts of benefits. So they have other foibles that are an issue, but
Hmm.
they're parts of their culture for which I am grateful.
Yeah, and that's amazing too. And I mean, those things, like we said, little costs can add up. But if it's in your, like you said, if you like it and you can budget, by all means, right? It's okay to have those little things.
Like, it is. I look at it and I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So,
Final question. Hopefully this wasn't too bad, Monica. But if you got $1 million tomorrow, what would your first move be?
boy, a couple of things. I would give a piece off to charity because I believe in that.
Hmm.
You're saying $1 million after taxes, right?
Yes. Yeah. $1 million in your pot in your bank account. It's yours.
Okay, so there are some business things I would do. Most of it would get invested, and I would pay off the house.
Yeah. I think most of us that have a mortgage are always like that. Got to get rid of that mortgage, right?
Well, not necessarily, okay? Because when you look at that, the interest rate on my mortgage is so low.
Hmm. Oh, yeah. That's true.
So the question is, you have to balance that out. Okay, it actually is that my mortgage payment is less than my property tax and insurance on the house.
I could believe that because I'm almost the same here where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny, but no, thank you for that. Thanks for indulging me in the dude Q&A, just those quick things. Like I said, hopefully you found it fun, but it's just
I
fun to get
did.
to learn a little bit about you. But Monica, this has been amazing, and I really loved all the things that you've had. But can you give a final pitch? Why should our listeners check out harmonywealthacademy.com?
Okay, if you're in a position where you looked at yourself on the 15th of April and you realized you hadn't grown what you wanted to grow, or you don't feel like you're on path to get to where you want to go, and you look at yourself and you say, hey, I need to step back and learn what I'm doing. If you want a fresh start, if you believe that you can do better, talk to me, talk to us. We can empower you to actually take control and move forward with confidence. That's what we're doing.
That's amazing. Thank you, Monica, so much. Thank you for joining us today, for sharing with our listeners, because I think this is something that affects, our normal everyday people. And I want to thank you for sharing your extraordinary story of how you learned these different things and are now sharing these with other folks because, like we've already talked about, we're not taught all these things. So it's nice to have a place for our folks to go to hopefully get them to that next level they want to be at.
Thank you so much for having me and for giving me a chance to talk to your community. I've really enjoyed it. And if there's ever anything I can do for you and your community, please let me know.
There you go, folks. Head over to harmonywealthacademy.com and maybe you'll be the next wealth building dude or dudette. Monica, I want to thank you again for dropping your knowledge and stopping by and teaching everybody about what it means to be financially free. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. Until next time, stay chill, keep learning, and keep being just a dude or a dudette. I've been Nathan with Just a Dude Podcast. See you on the next episode.